Hi, my name is Christy. Welcome back to my channel where I take old things and turn them into new things. In today's video, I am taking one of my husband's old button-up dress shirts that is now way too big for him and turning it into a button-up skirt. I have challenges with buttonholes. I don't know about you, but it never seems to work the way that it's supposed to. It'll work like once and then never again. So some struggles in this video. I hope that it's entertaining to you. So if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to my channel to continue watching me struggle and like the video, because why not? So if you're ready, I'm ready. I'm so excited. Let's get to it. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, here's my husband's old dress shirt since he lost 60 pounds. I swear, men can like sneeze and lose weight. Anyways, proud of you, honey. But here it is. It's a good quality fabric and there's quite a bit of it to work from. Just getting some basic measurements. Looks like it's going to be between 19 and 20 inches long, which is a decent length. And seeing what I need to seam rip, like that pocket and then the black label and those extra buttons. I would say seam ripping is probably my least favorite part to every project. And if you've watched my videos before, you know that it is all over them because I make a lot of mistakes. And your reward is a dirty pocket. That's all you get from it. Dirty, gross. There's a lot of cutting in this project. So here's the first one, just making marks right underneath the armpit on a straight line. If you have a straight ruler, that's probably easier, but I just used what I had and then cut across those marks to make the skirt bottom. I have enough fabric that I don't have to seam rip the sleeves off, so just cutting makes it easier and it's quite the time saver. Same for the sleeves, just cut down the middle to get the most fabric and then cut the cuffs off. I ended up only using one sleeve, but now I have these cool cuffs that I can wear on a night out on the town. Using the sleeve fabric, I'm measuring out the waistband for the skirt. This is the part where I always second guess myself because it's math, and luckily I measured longer than I needed it to be, which is better than measuring too short. Oh, and quick tip is to always iron first. I didn't, and I did not make a nice rectangle because of those folds at the top. In the end, I measured 4 inches across, which will give me an 1.5 inch waistband with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side. So I'm using my first janky rectangle as a guide to cut a second janky rectangle. Fold one piece in half and then cut along the seam to make the rest of the waistband. To add a little more strength to the waistband, I have cut out matching pieces of iron-on interfacing. So put the textured side on the wrong side of the fabric, use a pillowcase to protect your iron, and hold it in place over each spot for about 5 seconds or so just to make sure it adheres. I was not careful enough when cutting out the iron-on interfacing because on all 3 pieces, it stuck to the ironing board cover. At least it worked. With right sides together, line up the 2 front waistband pieces onto the back waistband piece so that you can pin to sew. Finally sewing. I told you there's a lot of cutting in this project, but this is real simple, just about a 1/2 inch seam allowance and making sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Just sew along the sides. So far it's looking good. For that inside seam, I'm just going to trim a little bit of the excess and iron it flat so when you fold it in half, it lays nicely. To make sure the top of the skirt fits into the waistband measurements, I am sewing 2 parallel lines of straight stitch along the top so that I can gather it. And it's right around here that I remembered that when doing so, you're supposed to lengthen the stitch length as much as possible to make it easier to gather. My old friend, the seam ripper. Luckily I didn't stitch too far, however. Still get a zoomed in angry eye. Here's proof right there that I attempted to hold on to the threads to make sure that they don't tangle, which didn't work. They still tangled. Anyways, now that I have adjusted my sewing machine to the longest possible stitch length, which is a 6 on my machine, not sure what a 6 correlates to, millimeters? Leave me a comment if you know what it means. Anyways, oh, and it's super important to note that when using stitches together, you do not want to back stitch at the beginning or end, but rather leave long thread tails. Sewing the second line of parallel stitching at that 6 stitch length, whatever that means. The first one was at 1/4 inch and this one is at a 1/2 inch. You don't have to do 2, but I find that 2 gives you better control over the gathering. And same thing, don't backstitch at the beginning or the end. Separating the 2 bobbin threads from the 2 top threads, taking only the 2 bobbin threads, start gently pulling, really gently. You don't want to break your thread. This is sometimes where the 2 threads comes in handy also, but it was really hard to get started because of the thick button placket. I also went to the other side to start pulling on those threads to kind of even out in the middle, and that's where I found that my tangled threads was making it a little more difficult than usual. 2 things here. So I finished the gathers and refit it to my waist just to make sure that it still fit, tied off the ends, and then on the waistband I ironed out a few markings, the 1 1/2 and then a 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side. With right sides together, line up the waistband side seams with the skirt side seams and pin in place. I pinned just below the bottom line of gathering stitches to make sure it wouldn't show. Using that ironed fold as a guide, stitch all along the skirt top. Okay, I cannot take credit for this, but this is such a great way to professionally finish off the edge of a waistband. Just fold it right sides together with that little 1/2 inch flap at the bottom folded up, then pin in place to sew along the edge. I've made a chalk mark line, and just to make sure that this line is in the right place, put another pin through it and then just look on the other side to make sure it's in the right spot. Next step is just to sew along both sides. And then cut the corners to eliminate some of the bulk. Make sure you spray it all over your sewing machine and your projects like I've done here. And then watch this. All you do is turn it right side out, poke out the corners, and look, it looks totally professional. And then do the exact same thing on the other side. Now that both ends of the waistband are looking great, now it's time to close up the rest of the waistband on the inside. So all I'm doing here is just lining it up, feeling with my fingers to make sure that it's perfectly even, and then pinning in place. Now that I have it all pinned in place, the next step is to just do a top stitch along the whole length of the skirt. And be really careful with this because it'll be seen from the outside of the skirt. So you're going really, really, really close to the edge. So far, this is a really simple project until you get to the buttons. So here I am marking where the button should go, and then suddenly I start marking where the button hole should go, completely ignoring that it's on the wrong side. So here's the button foot, and this has worked for me like once, maybe once. You open up the end and put the button in, and it's all automatic. So it's supposed to tell the machine how long the button is, and it's just supposed to do it for you. But it like never works. So here I am trying for the first time, and this one's on me because I totally already see the mistake that I did. There's a lever that you're supposed to pull down, and I didn't do it. And sure enough, it did not work. Attempt number 2, and I still don't have that lever down. So again, it didn't work. Getting really frustrated, but attempt number 3, I finally put the lever down. You can see it there, but it still didn't work. At this point, I'm just angry at my machine, and I start hand sewing, and until I realized that that was a terrible idea too. So I go back to my machine, look at that, it looks terrible, and decide to do a zigzag stitch. So a really long stitch length at the top and the bottom, and then a shorter one up and down the sides. And it looked okay, but I'm still forgetting that I'm doing this all on the wrong side. Trying to open up the button hole, I placed a pin at the top so that my seam ripper doesn't go through. And it's so thick that I can barely get it up there. And then to make matters worse, look what happens. I totally broke my poor seam ripper. How does that even happen? Then to add insult to injury, this is where I finally realized I did it all on the wrong side. So I remarked it on the correct side. Look at those buttons staring at me in the face, taunting me. And since I had a practice run on the wrong side, I just did the zigzag stitch, and look, the button goes through, finally. Last step in the button saga is to mark and hand sew the button on over that hole that I made on the wrong side, but it's the right side for the button. So as long as the skirt is buttoned, you can't tell my mistake. I tried the skirt on again, and because it's shorter at the sides, in my opinion, it still looks too much like a shirt. If that's the look you are going for, awesome. Go for it. It's still gonna look great. Here I'm using my Dress Forms Fun Hem tool to pin and hem all along at the same length. And here's what it looks like at the end. I think it turned out pretty good. Last step is to do a simple rolled hem for the bottom. You can use pins. I used it at the beginning, but then they just kind of got in the way. So if you are just careful and go slow, just fold and fold again all along the end and just kind of keep it tight. It works out really well. You don't really need pins. And it's done. Here's the final transformation.